So we thought then, what's the best kind of setup for us? We try to think about some fundamental principles that we as a regulator can follow when it comes to thinking about using technology. So our big kind of, our big focus then is to think about the kind of 4 key tenets for us as a regulator when it comes to thinking about the use of technology. It's a vast area with a lot of potential for quality improvements. So what we did is we thought about really we need to focus on 4 key principles whenever we are standard setting, whenever we're writing guidance, when we're thinking about inspections, when we're thinking about enforcement. What 4 things should we always be thinking about as a regulator? And the first is principles oriented. Throughout all of those consultations that we've done, we've repeatedly asked the same question, which is, if you are afraid of using this tool in an audit, can you point to something in any of our standards that you think means you can't use that tool? We've asked again, asked it different ways, asked different kinds of audit firms. And the answer is fundamentally, there isn't anything that says you can't use that tool. You look at risk assessment standards, they don't tell you exactly what process to use, what tool to use to assess risk. They just ask that you do it. What people have said, though, is that there aren't really very many mentions of technology in some of the international standards for auditing. That's changed a little bit. ISO 315 now has more references to technology than they did before. So part of that, though, is to say that the fundamental principles of how audit works is not incompatible with the use of technology, be that data analytics, be that even things like machine learning, which I'll touch on a little bit at the end. It's about trying to think then, well, if we're principles oriented, what does that mean as a standard setup? It probably means we don't need to make massive changes to either the audit model or the standards themselves. Partly because that would hugely date it. If I started to write a standard now that took account of all of the technology in existence at the moment, by the time I've been through the kind of behemoth that is the governance process for getting a standard out there, it would be vastly out of date. So when we think about principles oriented, then we think that the best approach is to think about guidance. So rather than thinking about adjusting the standard, it's to think about what kind of sensible guidance can we put out there to help people. So that's why we did things like our addressing exceptions guidance. And it's why we're working at the moment on some guidance around how auditors might use machine learning to think about risk assessment. It's a difficult balance because we are a regulator. We set the standards. We also inspect and enforce. So that process of thinking about, well, how do we put guidance out that is helpful, but also broad enough that it's usable by different firms, but also doesn't date very quickly. And that's why it takes me months and months to write anything. I think about it 1,000 times. Quality focused. So there are a lot of technologies out there. We keep getting asked about our opinion on all kinds of technologies. One that's come up a few times recently, which might be metaverse related, is what's our view on corporate reporting in virtual reality? I mean, my personal view is that virtual reality makes me feel a bit nauseous, so I'm not a big fan of it, but I suspect that's more of a personal view. But it's an interesting area. Is it something we should devote significant regulatory time to, though, given we don't have a huge amount of resource? Probably not. So where's the big issues, and where are the technologies that can really help to improve quality? Already, data quality has come up with the current speaks, and I'm sure data quality will come up with everybody else who speaks today. And that is one of the key areas of focus. How do you get better quality data? How do you think about things like distributed ledger technology and how that can help with data quality? We also make sure that our stuff is outreach-led. This is also a challenging area. It's sometimes easy as a regulator, and I think there's a perception sometimes that it's a kind of ivory tower type situation, that we can sit up there, we can set a standard, not really have a great deal of regard for how it works in practice, and then just hope everyone follows it or that it's incredible. It's just not true in terms of how it works. So outreach-led essentially means that we really try to talk to stakeholders. A lot of our guidance now is developed with working groups that includes all of the people that are using these tools on a day-to-day basis. So our exceptions guidance from last year, the machine learning stuff we're thinking about in a minute, is all done with working groups that involve the audit firms themselves, other assurance providers, third-party tools providers, experts. We have an ongoing relationship with the Alan Turing Institute in the UK, who do a lot of work, as the name might suggest, on machine learning and how that kind of works in a financial services context. So we really think that outreach-led is the most important bit. It's part of the reason I'm here today, is to think about the links to academia, about those links to, everybody else that uses those standards, because they're not just written in isolation by us and only used by us, and that it's proportionate. That what we try to do is make a positive contribution, but we don't need to, as I've said before, talk about everything. We don't need to have a view or opinion on every single piece of technology that's coming out or is out at the moment. So when I'm talking about kind of tools and technology in general, this is what I've always got in mind, these kind of 4 key principles, to really think about what is the most beneficial way of setting standards and regulating auditors when it comes to using technology.